Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are well today. I will start, and I will try to be brief, as I know the SG has a stakeout at 12:30, so you all will be on time to attend there as well. Let's start with the official trip of the President to China. The President of the General Assembly met the Vice President of the All China Women's Federation, Ms. Huang Xiaowei, earlier today in the country's capital, Beijing. Ms. María Fernanda Espinosa spoke about gender equality as part of her 7 priorities for the current session of the General Assembly. The PGA stressed the importance of empowering women and girls and outlined her efforts on 3 fronts: political leadership, economic empowerment, and transforming social norms to accelerate women's empowerment. One of these initiatives was the high-level meeting Women in Power, which the PGA conducted in March when she invited female heads of state and government to New York and launched a call for action. Before this meeting, Mrs. Espinosa visited the Chairman Mao Memorial Hall and met with the director of the Office of the Foreign Affairs Commission of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee, His Excellency, Mr. Yang Chechu. On her Twitter account, the PGA commended Mr. Chechu's commitment to the potential of South-South cooperation. On Monday, Ms. Espinosa held bilateral meetings with the Chinese Prime Minister, His Excellency Mr. Li Keqiang, and the country's State Councilor and Foreign Minister, His Excellency Wang Yi. The PGA will conclude her visit to China on Thursday with a visit to the China Disabled Persons Federation. And the President of the General Assembly has sent a letter of condolence to the former UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon on the passing of his mother, Ms. Shi Hyun-sun. She noted that Ms. Shin had just celebrated her 100th birthday and that she must have been extremely proud of all that the former SG had achieved in the furtherance of peace and development, as such as distinguished servants of the Republic of Korea and of the United Nations. The PJ said that her thoughts are very much with Mr. Barnes and his family at this very time of sorrow. And finally, the PGA will hold a press conference on the 27th of June here at 11 a.m. at the press briefing room for all ANCA correspondents. She will make short opening remarks and dedicate most of the time to the interaction with you. The conference will start at 11 a.m. until 12 p.m., so we will hand over on time to the noon briefing by the spokesperson for the Secretary General. And we look forward to the interaction with you. So this is all from us today. Do you have anything? Joe, how are you?
Thank you, I'm fine. Did the subject of the Hong Kong protests or the plight of the Uyghurs in so-called detention camps come up during the PGA's discussions with any of the Chinese officials?
As you know, the official visit is still going on. She's now on her 2nd day in China. We talked here last week about that. The PJ is focusing her trip right now, her visit to the cooperation with China on the 2030 Agenda, Sustainable Development Goals, and all relevant points to this cooperation that are interesting and relevant to the conversations she is actually talking about. We are preparing a readout of the meetings, of all her meetings once the visit is over, so that you can follow what has been discussed. So at this point, I don't have any further information on the upcoming meetings. Yes.
But good governance is one of the SDGs. So I'm wondering whether, and maybe you'll answer that with the readout, there was any discussion focused on that with respect to the issues I mentioned. And was there any attempt to meet with President Xi?
No, the PJ actually had the meeting with the Prime Minister, and all the meetings were scheduled ahead. So she went to China before, met with the President before, And so her agenda this time was a bit different, but basically she is discussing the cooperation with the United Nations and also the contribution that China has been giving not only to the organization but to her seven-point agenda. And this is one of the reasons today she had the meeting with the All China's Federation Vice President in order also to continue the cooperation and also the efforts to empower women and girls. Yes. How are you? Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Monica. Taking in account all these good cooperation with China and importance of the good cooperation with China, I wonder, there is a strong criticism issued yesterday from Human Rights Watch on the address of the DO and the Secretary General that his official during the visit in China didn't even challenge the official narrative of Beijing on those human rights abuses. I wonder what does the President of General Assembly has to say on that, and is she willing somehow to challenge that official narrative?
In regard with the visit of Mr. Voronkov, I would actually refer you to his office because they have all the agenda and all, of course, the interactions that he held there. So the visit of the PJs, it's a separate visit, and she's very much focusing on the points of her agenda, on the Agenda 2030, or the 2030 Agenda, excuse my Portuguese. And yes, that's, of course, she has her priorities, but I am aware of what you are asking, and I think the question was actually asked to Stefan yesterday, and I would rather refer you to the office of Mr. Voronkov's. Yes. Mm-hmm. Stefano, go ahead. I get back to you, Arrow. Stefano.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Yesterday, Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini was in Washington, and he was meeting the Vice President and also Secretary of State Pompeo. During a press conference, we asked him what he thought about criticism that came from the UN about his policy, his law on migrants. And his response was that the UN is not transparent, it spends too much money. Actually, Italy is investigating how the contribution that the UN gets, how it's spent, because he thinks that there is a lot of, he called it a buffet. I guess he was talking like President Trump once said that there were a lot of parties going on. And also he said that there were privileges. He has to investigate it. And so he said that Italy is still waiting for inspector to come to Italy to investigate, but Italy is investigating UN how it spends money. So how that President of the General Assembly will take those accusations, also because the General Assembly is the one that decide about the budget, how also the money is spent, and so on.
Well, first of all, I think since Mrs. Espinosa started her presidency, she made very clear that the General Assembly is the most democratic forum, or body, I would say, of this organization. We have 193 member states, which are not all the time, or probably most of the time, in consensus about everything. But this is also the beauty of this body, that people can have different opinions, can discuss, reflect, and also try to reach a consensus. I will not comment on the comments of the Italian authority that you just mentioned. I think the most important thing that we have to focus here right now is one of the priorities of the president, which is the revitalization of the United Nations. She has advocated for a more efficient, a more agile organization, where we can, of course, not only reflect on serving the people who we are here to serve better, but also serving actually these people better and being more agile and more dynamic. I think these are all points that are taken into account and the president advocates for. Different opinions are there to be listened to and respected. This is a dialogue that we foster here, and that's why everybody's opinions is important. When you talk about the question of migration, there is a framework in place in this organization and on international terms as well that protects migrants, that assists people who are in a desperate situation in need to be assisted. And we are going to continue to defend this and to care for this and to continue our conversation and dialogue with all countries in order to get that implemented in the best way possible to the people who need them. Okay, now I go back to Arrow.
Yeah, just to clarify, you mentioned that agreement you taught on the Marrakesh agreement on the migrants.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And then also the cooperation of the entire organization when it comes to the question of the migrants. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So my question is, there are media reports that the 17 development goals are somehow now in limbo and they are mostly stay elusive. My question is whether the PGA is concerned about that, what she thinks about it. Did she hear about that, and what is her standpoint on that?
The PGA is not only concerned, the PGA is actually working hard, day in and day out to achieve more for the SDGs and also for the SDGs to be achieved by 2030. You remember that last week we had the negotiations for the political declaration on the SDG summit. And one of the points, Arrow, you are spot on, is basically that we have to launch on this political declaration, which is online, by the way. If you go on our website, on the section document letters, you can get the entire text. And one of the points is that we have to launch a more ambitious and accelerated response to reach our common vision by 2030. And for that, countries will pledge to make the coming decade one of action and delivery. So it's a collective effort, and she has been leading these efforts in order to have now an accelerated pace, we would say, in order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. But again, this is not only the responsibility of the PGA, of the SDGs, this is responsibility of the international community, countries, the stakeholders, private sector, public sector. It's a big alliance that we all have to be engaged with and active with, yeah.
Does she believe that those goals will be achieved by 2030?
Well, we here work in this direction, and we have to be consistent on what we propose and on what we achieve, because this nexus needs to be there. Otherwise, we would be in a very complicated situation. So if you don't have anything else, I would say thank you so much for coming today, and I see you tomorrow at the same time. And you have a trip announcement for tomorrow. Thank you.